And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Not a lot to get to, just really one big thing. That is the winning. Remember the winning we were going to all be tired of? If you're Donald Trump, not so much. Another couple of lawsuits down in flame. I don't know, is this like 600 suits that he and his legal brain trust have filed that have gone down in flames? This time, the Supreme Court again telling them no, writing in a very simple, very straightforward, smackdown. Texas has not demonstrated judicially cognizable interest in the matter in which another state conducts its elections. All other pending motions are dismissed as moot. It's done. It's gone. Now, look, you got Gorsuch, you got Kavanaugh, you got Amy Covid Barrett. They all smacked him down. So much for the loyalty that he was depending on. Even they threw him under the bus because guess what? Nothing there. All 50 states and the District of Columbia have all certified their elections. 2020 is now fully certified. Joe Biden is the winner again. And I think Biden's won, 15, 20 times now? The winning just keeps, and this is the winning he was talking about, Trump was talking about a couple years ago. Because every day it seems like Joe Biden wins again. Understand, Biden won with more than 50% of the vote. More than 7 million more votes. That is, in this electoral environment, a major butt whipping. But you had these, 18 attorneys generals from across the country who thought, hey, we don't have to worry about that Constitution thing. We know better. Florida, you got nothing on us. But Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and of course Georgia, those 18 states know better than you do. They know your laws better. Their attorneys generals are smarter than your attorneys generals and your state Supreme Court. So good. Now you've got 126, as of right now, Republican congressmen and women who have signed on to, setting aside the election, and this will be the next congressional fight. This is the next battle. This is the next thing because they've got nothing left. But this is it. Here in Pennsylvania, we had 64 moronic members of the General Assembly sign on to not certifying the election. And look, you've had hundreds of state legislators across the country doing the same thing. But here's the reality. It's over. It's over. Donald Trump lost. I don't know how much more simply that can be put. Ben Sass today had a quote. Since election night, a lot of people have been confusing voters by spinning Kenyan birther type Chavez rigged the election from the grave conspiracy theories. But every American who cares about the rule of law should take comfort that the Supreme Court, including all three of President Trump's picks, closed the book on the nonsense. That didn't stop the chairman of the Texas Republican Party. I had wondered what happened to crazy Alan West. You may remember Alan. He was a congressman from Florida. Florida must have kicked him out because maybe too crazy for Florida. But he is now the head of the Texas Republican Party. He very angry that the U.S. Supreme Court tossed out the lawsuit and went as far to basically say, maybe we law-abiding states, we should band together in kind of a United States. One, kind of stupid because we are already there. We have laws. But the bigger part of this is I remember when the Republican Party, now come back with me on this because this could go back a while. They used to be for personal responsibility too, but that was way back. The Republican Party used to be the party of the 10th Amendment. In fact, Alan West was a big 10ther. The idea that states should be able to do their thing, like hold elections, and that the federal government, the big overarching evil federal government, should not have any power over the states, that they were laboratories of innovation and that they should be left as so. Now, for someone like me who says, yeah, for the most part, I'm with you on that, but there are still things we need to be able to do, set a minimum wage, set working standards, set environmental policy. We should be able to do that at a federal level so everyone's on a level playing field. The West types, the Texas GOP types, the old Republicans who, no, everything goes back to the states. They're nowhere to be found. I mean, it's curious. It's comical on a certain level, but it shows the hypocrisy. It shows the level of hypocrisy that is so prevalent in today's Republican Party. And it comes down to one of these things that I'm just stuck on, because I remember a Republican Party that had some principles. Now, it's going back a ways, because I'm getting a little bit older now and it's way back there. But they used to. They used to believe in this stuff. Not so much anymore. And what's interesting to me is the right-wing grievance machinery that are the think tanks and all of the AstroTurf front groups that are funded by billionaires like Judicial Watch and others. They kind of took it in stride. Because I don't believe anybody really, any sane, rational person ever really thought that the Supreme Court was going to overturn the election. There would literally be riots in the streets. And the right-wing gun nuts would maybe finally get their wish. But our Supreme Court didn't do that. They deferred to the states because the Constitution, that kind of thing. And look, even me, I'm not a lawyer. I knew that these 18 states attorney generals didn't have standing in this case, which is not surprising. That's why they did away with it. But it's amazing to me how the anger machine, the 2 minutes hate we hear all over the radio, 3 hours a day, segment after segment from right-wing hate radio. It's amazing how fast they turned. How fast on a dime they went from, the election's over, to now Hunter Biden. Over here, get outraged about this. Stay angry about this. We need you all bunched up in the panties. So when we come back at you with whatever the next iteration of Trump insanity is, you can be still outraged about Hunter Biden because maybe we found another laptop. I don't know. Maybe another one has popped up somewhere, maybe in Texas. So they got you. They want you all riled, so that the next thing that they can do, because next week, the electors are going to be, bringing their votes in on the 14th, and they're going to want you to be upset about that. But it's constantly going back and forth because a loss is kind of a downer, and they did lose badly, unanimously in the Supreme Court, where conservatives hold a 6-3 majority. You know what that meant? That meant that everything that Dear Donald and the evangelical crowd and the corporate wing had been pushing for didn't work for Donald. And what that tells me is a couple of things. One, they threw him under the bus because they really got to get rid of him because he's bad for business. And two, that whole loyalty he thought was there, and this is my favorite part, because he's going to have to deal with this. Not there. They got what they wanted, and they have moved on. Obviously, without him. So good, and I guess it bears out. It bears out in some of the polling that we see. Fox News has a new poll out. Says the majority of the country thinks we're much worse off than we were 4 years ago. And you go, you think? In fact, I was shocked at how low it was. Only 55% of the people said we're worse off than we were 4 years ago. We're going through a global pandemic. We're going through a once-in-a-100-year moment caused by the ineptitude of the person that is sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But I digress. 55% say we're worse off. 32% say we're better off. And I'm going, who are these 32%? Where are they? Oh, that's right. those are the most ardent Trump supporters. Those are the ones in their basements, declaring they're going to have civil war and we're going to secede from the Union and all that. 11% say the same. Asked if they were personally better off, 33% said they were personally better off. 36% said they're worse off. 30% said the same. On the economy, 11% said excellent. The economy is excellent. That is up from 3% in 2016. And I'm going, am I missing something? Oh yeah, those are the very top folks who have seen their wealth grow exponentially, while the bottom half of the economy is really just taking it, not just on the chin, but everywhere else. These are the people who are on the brink of losing their homes the day after Christmas. These are the people who are on the brink of losing all of their savings. They've lost their jobs, their health care. And we can't get anything out of Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate to help them. But we did have some billionaires. Our billionaire class did do really well. In fact, from the beginning of the pandemic until now, they've pocketed a cool trill. They got a cool $1 trillion of wealth in their pocket. And to remind you that the frontline heroes, the people who hold the bag out the window so we don't have to cook, those poor folks are still making $7.25 an hour because we haven't raised the minimum wage in over a decade. But at least we've got a billionaire class who put another $1 trillion in their pockets. And it's angering and it's frustrating and all of this stuff. And it's only going to get worse if Georgia doesn't do the right thing. And it's one of these things where yesterday we did the Michelle Bachmann prayer. Had Michelle Bachmann give her little prayer of, "Oh Lord, please deliver Donald Trump so we can have him for." It was crazy. But the reality is only Georgia can deliver us from the evil that's coming. Today, the blaring headlines. Senate passes stopgap bill to avoid government shutdown. We're 2 weeks from Christmas. 2 weeks from the day will be Christmas. And glaring headlines. Thank goodness for the Senate. They passed a stopgap measure. And so I'm saying, I read this and I'm going, get ready for this for the next couple of years if the Democrats don't win both seats in Georgia. Get ready for Mitch McConnell doing the same kind of things he did all during the Obama term, the hostage situations, the down to the last minute kind of, we got to get screw Quester. We got to cut spending at every level, which ultimately, in my view, led to what happened in Benghazi. But no, that's Hillary Clinton's fault because she had a private email. Wow. How you get to one place from the other is insane to me. But by cutting the budgets, by slashing and burning our budgets, we left that embassy without the resources it needed. But no, it's because of her email. Yeah, I don't know how you sell that, but they did. They did. Congratulations. But get ready for it. We're going to have this kind of ticking bomb scenario quite often as we go forward. And look, we're in the middle of this horrible moment. The pandemic is raging. Unemployment numbers are going through the roof. And we have Mitch McConnell, who's still defiant in the face of all the pain and misery of the working people of this country because he wants his liability shield. He wants corporate America to be protected from, its workers. So when they get sick, it's not their fault. You shouldn't have come to work. I kid you not. Not to mention, and this is the part that gets me. Look, I can understand if an employer does everything they can possibly do. They clean the surfaces, they give people the PPE they need, and somehow someone still gets sick. I can see saying, you know what, there's a rational path. But to say blanket immunity, no recourse whatsoever, and to handcuff what little OSHA has done is just mind-blowing to me. But it does show you the power that corporate America has. It does show you the power that the moneyed interests have in our political system. And we can't get any survival checks for people. We can't get the assistance that they need to stave off being thrown out of their homes, either foreclosed on or evicted, because Mitch McConnell has blocked and continues to block any stimulus/survival benefits because he wants his 100 pounds of flesh. He wants that immunity in the worst way. And it's one of these things where I've had people go to me, well, but Rick, the Democrats, they won't negotiate. They wanted that big $3.2 trillion bill that would have really helped our economy and really helped people stay home and really tap down the anger that's out there. But no, the Democrats would not. They would not. No negotiating. And I go, no, they've been negotiating all along. The difference is this time the Democrats with Nancy Pelosi, and I got to give her a little bit of credit for having a spine, weren't going to be bullied into, we're in this moment, take anything. They said, we got to get something that's really going to work. And Mitch McConnell let Donald Trump lose because he didn't get his pound of flesh. I mean, think about how much power that one guy has. And this is one of these moments where you go, will there be Republicans who step forward? Now, Josh Hawley, who has come out and said, look, we're going to do a standalone bill to get checks to people, the $1,200 checks that we got back, before the summer, for people making under $75,000. We're going to get those out. He said, everyone in this Senate has voted for it already. It's not controversial. It's what we need to do. And it's not in the bill that McConnell is pushing. He said next week he is going to stand up and, call for a vote. Now, he can do that. Any senator can do that, just as any senator can stand up and say no. But I would love to see him stand up and say, you know what, we got to get this done. I would also love to see him, if he's got the courage, to then caucus with the Democrats and not allow McConnell to be the Senate majority leader. Even if, no matter what happens in Georgia, put Mitt Romney in charge. I don't care. Anybody but McConnell. McConnell has been the bearer of all the horrible. He has been the guy who has blocked and delayed and caused this crisis to get much worse on people that it didn't have to be. That's angering and frustrating. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day streetcar workers in Kansas City walked off the job. It was the third strike since August 1917. Workers had previously struck for union recognition and joined the city general strike that spring. By summer, the city was so desperate for wartime labor, the transit company began hiring women. Though women faced initial opposition, by fall, the union demanded they receive equal pay for equal work. The company had been paying them $15 less a month than their male co-workers. The Amalgamated filed charges with the National War Labor Board, demanding a general wage increase and equal wages for women. The board quickly ruled in the union's favor, but Kansas City Railway refused to abide by the decision. And on this day, 2,675 men and 127 women walked off the job, demanding the company honor the board's ruling. Instead, the company hired scabs. In the rush to restore service, the company failed to properly train the scab drivers, and a number of streetcar crashes reduced the transit company's fleet by more than 300 cars. According to Maureen Weiner Greenwald, author of Women, War, and Work, the company alleged in the press that the strike was an attack against the entire community. On the Missouri side, state militia guarded the strikebreakers, while U.S. Marshals guarded rail tracks on the Kansas side. By April 1919, a federal grand jury indicted union leaders for obstructing a vital industry during wartime, even though the war had been over for 6 months. By May, the strike was lost, and the union busted. It would take another 20 years before Kansas City Transit would finally be organized. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, I love the fact that the Orlando Sentinel newspaper came out today and apologized for endorsing Republican Representative Michael Waltz, one of the Republican members of Congress who signed on to the baseless crusade, as they call it. And I'm so happy that our U.S. Supreme Court said, no, nothing to see, move along. And here to share some thoughts on today's decision and maybe where things go from here, I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come talk with us. Scott is the host of the fabulous Dworkin Report, also co-founder of the Democratic Coalition. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm actually in a better place. Pretty happy by the fact that I was a little worried about the Trump appointees, Alito, Thomas. A little worried, but happy to see a unanimous smackdown.
Yeah, it's clear that our country has won, and it's a debate like most debates that we shouldn't even be having in the first place. Like how he negotiates with humanity, he also negotiates using our democracy. Two of the most un-American things that I've ever heard. And this is just par for the course. Now, even though he had won, I think it's important for us all to realize that this is not going to be over until January 20th at noon. Then we move on to a next phase. But this is not going to end until then. And I think we have to keep our guard up. We have to keep on fighting. We can't cede an inch. And we must make sure that it's very clear that we won't stand for any of this nonsense. No. And I think without the public pressure, he would have succeeded in a lot of these things. But the public pressure was overwhelming. If you think about the Michigan lawmakers who went to D.C. to meet with him at the White House, we had them tracked when they went to the airport. They had protesters. When they hit the ground, they had protesters and press. The pressure is what got to them, and they realized, oh, you know what? I don't want to get arrested for some kind of activity that, Trump ensnares me with. And I think that a lot of other people consider that as well. And I guess the ironic thing of all of this is COVID, because of Giuliani's infection, a lot of the folks in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, and Arizona had to actually quarantine because state reps, GOP state reps, because of Rudy and the interactions they had, that no masks on, and I think their pompous attitude came back to bite them. So in the end, COVID really assisted in ending the legal challenges in a weird way. But it's just disgusting and pathetic. But I'll just be real. Until January 20th at noon, game on. And we're not, including Christmas Day, we're working every single day as if the campaign's still on. Of course, we have Georgia, so that's a main focus. But we've got to keep our eye on the ball and make sure that he doesn't do anything that is just beyond where he tries to pull a coup or do something very, very serious that's illegal. And so we have to keep that in mind, is what are you willing to do to not spend the rest of your life in prison? And that's the kind of question we need to ask. And I think I know that it needs to be said. It doesn't mean it's going to be a fact, but he needs to be removed from office immediately. I mean, this is really not the time to test the waters with whether or not he's going to do something crazy. Luckily, we have less than 40 days left, so I think that it looks bright, but we will not be able to enjoy or experience this victory for real until January 20th. Even if he leaves, goes to Mar-a-Lago, and we have a break from all this nonsense for a few weeks and focus on COVID, he'll come back to the White House the week of the inauguration and act like he's going to stay and act like he's going to do another term on top of another term, and he's never leaving the White House. And then he'll leave, and he'll head to Florida or Russia or wherever he goes.
Either Mar-a-Lago or Moscow, one or the other. But the thing that I keep coming back to, and I've had these conversations with people about our institutions they've bent, the bending has happened, but they've kind of still held. But I'm still amazed at how little spine the Republican Party has. I'm in this weird spot where are the statesmen? Where are they call themselves patriots? Where are they? Because between Trump and Mitch McConnell, the damage that they've done to American families across this country, the poverty that's come out of this virus, the lack of action by McConnell in the Senate, the pain is real and the damage is real. And when are these people going to step up and say, we really got to fix things?
When they're in the spotlight, and when this dumpster fire clown is out of office and done distracting us from the tyranny that they pull, I think that it's going to be really clear. Everything that they're doing is going to be under a microscope, and there's not going to be that distraction. I think people are really making a big deal about what happens next with Trump. No one cares. No one will care. He will be irrelevant immediately. The second that Biden is sworn in, no one will care what he's doing. And that includes his own supporters. He's going to lose a lot of that base too, because they're going to realize no matter how much of a cult they're in, they're gonna realize this is a sham. So there's only going to be a good 10% maybe of Americans that'll never believe that this is an election that's valid and all this other nonsense. But what I'd be careful with, and this is just a legal warning for anybody that's involved with an attempt to throw a coup. If you thought the Mueller investigation was something, if you thought that was intense, let me tell you about traitors in this country and investigating what you're trying to do right now. Hire a lawyer. You're going to need it. And I'm going to make sure I don't use any cuss words here. It's going to be a very long road for some of them, a long legal road, because I think what they don't realize is crimes have been committed in this process, and everyone will be held to account. Every single person that's been involved with the planning and execution of any illegal act against the United States of America, any conspiracy against the United States of America, we will find out and we will prosecute you, and you will go to prison.
No, it's important to bring that up because I've seen a lot of right wing, the angry grievance machine, if you will, talking about we're going to do everything, Scott. We're going to do everything to keep Donald Trump in office. And I'm going, I'd like a definition of what everything means. I see crazy Alan West, who is now, I didn't know, the head of the Texas GOP. I guess they threw him out of Florida.
Yeah.
Talking about secession. And this kind of talk, while coming from someone like West, you expect. But there are people who will take that and try and act upon it. So just as you said, if you're going to do something stupid like that, we will come and hold you accountable.
And there's some people that are going to be suing some of these people who. That's another thing that's going to be blowback, is they've named people and accused them of felonies, so they can sue and they can own their house when they're done with it. You can't file a legal brief and say, here's the evidence of this person committing fraud, a felony, and them not take action against you. Good luck on that. So I think that they're not prepared with the usual dumpster fire kind of circle of life in the Trump world, where all of a sudden they're going to have to be held to account, and Trump's not going to be there to help them. He's going to be coffee boy this and all this other garbage and act like he wasn't involved. It's crazy how many people buy into this money making machine. But again, it's nonsense to think about him at all come January 20th at noon. It is over. Whether President-elect Biden is sworn in at the Hilton or elsewhere, he will be in the White House shortly after inauguration and swearing in, no matter what.
Yeah, and if Trump doesn't leave, you can either give him a broom or throw him out, because that's the only use you're going to have for him. But here's the question that keeps coming back into my mind, and I've had a number of people throw this out at us. The you're saying that Trump's just going to go away and be irrelevant, but there are those of us who believe that he's going to start his Trump TV thing and maybe a campaign the day after or even the day of, hold simultaneous events, and just be a constant thorn in the side of any progress. So how are you sure that he's just going to go away?
He's not. He's going to look like the modern day Hitler. Like I once the smoke clears and the hundreds of thousands of bodies are exposed to the world without him distracting from it, the trauma that we're in right now, the constant 9/11 sort of attitude, when that calms down and decency and love and respect come back, it's going to reveal a few things. But I think even more importantly, the small, very clear things that President-elect Biden is going to institute will drive down numbers. It will crush COVID, the Trump virus, and it will end that saga for us. And I think when people see how quickly that happens, it will also reveal the fact that he could have been doing so much more and he didn't. Right. And not only that, but he was negligent and reckless. And he also was willing to spread the virus to try and go up in the polls. And he lied about it. He slowed testing. I was told the other day that another 100,000 people would be alive at least if we had testing everywhere. We might have home testing right now if he had developed it and not slowed the development of it. And so there's a lot of crimes here that have been committed. And I think people outside of this, there's also other criminal probes. And I just don't think that he's going to be too big of a liability, and there's not going to be a voice for him. I really believe that, because it's not. There's no other way for this to go. He's not going to be able to cover up everything. Biden's not going to even be involved with any potential prosecutions. He's going to let the DOJ do their jobs, and what that means is him and everybody around him that's committed crimes is going to end up getting prosecuted, on top of the lawsuits that he is facing, as well as his family, which are all viable, right, which are very money-wise as well.
A number of people I know are pushing for Doug Jones as Attorney General. Do you have someone that you'd want to see as Attorney General?
I mean, I'd love for it to be Sally Yates, but I think Trump has politicized her so much that it makes it difficult. One of the balancing acts that the president-elect has to do is he has to choose people who he knows that potentially could get confirmed. I think Doug Jones could get confirmed and be a stalwart progressive that is leading the DOJ. At the same time, my top two choices would be Sally Yates or Stacey Abrams, but I think that that's just not going to happen. That would happen maybe later on in the term, if there were to be a replacement. But really, it's about having experience and getting people so that they have some sort of progressive roots, except for obviously Department of Defense, as you've seen, but also follow the law, have respect for our country. Like, the bar is so low as to what it represents a good person in office. So I mean, we just need to hit a reset on our country. And again, when that happens, when the smoke clears like it did on 9/11, there is going to be a very loud chorus wanting that bin Laden. And who do you think is bin Laden in this scenario? And I think that is the crucial point that people are forgetting about. So he will be a nothing. The only reports that he'll get is on the criminal trials and anything else involving his family and the fraud that he's perpetrated, and all the former Trump supporters eventually that will probably sue him to try and get the money back. They'll never see another dime of it.
No, you're right. Now, next week there's supposed to be a hearing. Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, is having this big kangaroo court hearing, kind of taking Giuliani's lead. I'm waiting to see a Giuliani type hearing because they're bringing in Ken Starr. And you go, what exactly has Ken Starr got to do with this now? And why do they keep going back to the old faithful?
They don't. They don't know anybody else. There's not many people who are willing to vouch for them anymore. Ken Starr's been around long enough, like he can step in the mud and step out of it and apparently survive.
Blossom.
Yeah, so I mean, like he's one of the guys who's going to stick around and just be annoying. Again, I think that they're in for a rude awakening. I'd say it's a matter of months until a lot of Republicans act like they never met Trump, they never saw him, they never were a part of that. They love this country, they back Biden. I think we're going to see a lot of that because if they don't, they're going to get primaried by Trumpers, or they're going to be primaried if they support Trump. They're going to get primaried by people that the Lincoln Project and even groups like the Democratic Coalition is willing to support Republican candidates in primaries where a Trump representative is in office and there's no shot for a Democrat. We're willing to primary them as well. So I think this is not over by any means. And there will be consequences of the legal fashion and also the job fashion for all of these Republicans, and it will be a stain on them forever, as it should. Again, I don't think people are ready for 100 9/11s and thinking about that and how it's constant. It's not just one day of planes hitting the buildings. And again, I'll say there's gonna be a Bin Laden. And remember how big and loud and united the chorus was for that, and that was loud. I remember one of the reasons that Donald Trump got so angry with Barack Obama was that when I don't think it was a finale, but it definitely was near the end of an episode of The Apprentice, 10:40 or so. And that's when the NBC News interrupted and said, we have a special report coming. And Obama didn't come on till 11 because I think they were working some things out and what he was speaking about. And when he came on eventually, it was after his show was off, but it cut his show off the air. I think that there's a lot of resentment there. But again, there's going to be people to blame. Like, yep. You can't, when you see the difference between President-elect Biden and how clear and direct he is about everything, you're going to see him running around saying, wear a mask, wear a damn mask. It's a patriotic thing. Like, you don't be an idiot.
No,
like,
don't be an idiot. That's it. And hopefully we're going to hold them all accountable and lock him up. But Scott, I appreciate the time, man. Always great. Look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you, brother. And if anybody wants to join in, you can go to democraticcoalition.org to join in our efforts in Georgia. We've reached a third of the electorate so far. We're aiming for a full part. So thank you very much for having me.
Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2012. That was the day that Michigan Governor Rick Snyder signed right-to-work legislation into law. The birthplace of the United Auto Workers Union had just become the 24th state to pass legislation that guaranteed the open shop and the prohibition of mandatory dues collection. More than 10,000 trade unionists gathered in Lansing that day to express their outrage. The only source of income that unions have is their dues base. Without it, unions can't adequately represent their members. Work of unions isn't just about effectively negotiating a contract. It also includes fighting contract violations, excessive discipline and wrongful discharges, and enforcing safety and good working conditions on the job. All of this suffers under right to work. But this is nothing new. Right to work laws have their roots in fighting the Wagner Act and the CIO organizing drives throughout the South in the 1940s. The Texas billionaire and lobbyist Vance Muse fought hard against child labor laws, the 8-hour day, and even the right for striking workers to picket. Pro-segregationist Democrats, cotton brokers, Fred Koch, the DuPont brothers, Gerald Sloan of General Motors, and others supported him in his efforts. His organization, the Christian American Association, was closely aligned with the Ku Klux Klan. Muse argued argued that segregation could only be maintained by enforcing the open shop. Otherwise, whites would be forced to interact with blacks. He said, quote, "From now on, white women and white men will be forced into organizations with black African apes whom they will have to call brothers or lose their jobs. The wealth class has spent millions of dollars over 60 years to defeat working people and reverse hard-fought gains." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I've been saying, the hope is that with the new Biden administration, we end up with people in positions that actually know their job and want to do them in a way that isn't going to, destroy things. I want somebody at EPA who's going to make sure our air is clean, our water is clean. I want someone at the Department of Agriculture who's actually going to help small farmers to exist, help us do better with all the different things that they know how to do, as opposed to, let's see whose pocket we can line. And here to share some thoughts on the nomination of Tom Vilsack, former governor of Iowa, to the position of Secretary of U.S. Department of Agriculture. I've asked Kayla Bergman to come talk with us. She's a policy analyst with the Center for Rural Affairs, their website, cfra.org. Kayla, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let me get your thoughts on Governor Vilsack, former Secretary of the Department of Agriculture. Initial thoughts on him?
Yeah, well, I can't speak for whether or not he was the right pick for the job. I think there is something to be said for experience in this position. Since he served as the Secretary of Agriculture under the Obama administration, I would assume as a person that he would be able to hit the ground running, since he already has an understanding of the position and how to operate the Department of Ag. That being said, we are in different times than when he served previously. There are new issues to face, including the increased emphasis on addressing climate and the lasting effects of the trade war with China. So while his experience will help him with the context and background, he won't be able to operate the same ship as he did previously.
No,
but at the end of go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But at the end of the day, our organization, the Center for Rural Affairs, works in 4 main Corn Belt states. And having a Secretary of Agriculture from Iowa that understands Iowa agriculture and the small family farms in the Corn Belt will really be helpful for those farmers that we're working for. Now,
we hear an awful lot about small family farms. Are there any left? I mean, the sad reality is over the last couple of decades, we've seen this mass consolidation where these big agribusinesses have taken over so many of what used to be small farms that I don't know how you exist in the world. Are there still small family farms that we think about?
Absolutely. We are fortunate to be connected with such a really diverse group of small family farms, multi-generation farms, and keyword there is diverse. So there is a lot of opportunity out there if you're a small family farm to have row crops and livestock. And we're also working with farmers that have vegetable operations, niche products like that. And so, yes, there is still family farms out there, and we are doing what we can to support their existence and future growth.
Now, you brought up the trade war with China, and I'll be honest right from the front. I'm a supporter of the idea of having tariffs on Chinese goods as part of an overall strategy to bring China into line with the rest of the trade world, to stop manipulating their currency, to stop using slave labor, to stop with the corporate ownership of the state ownership of corporations and all of that. I think Donald Trump screwed it up badly. I don't think it was part of an overall strategy. But I know that the tariffs were going to hurt farmers. How bad has it been over the last 4 years for those small family farmers?
Yeah, absolutely. Times are tough, and they were tough previously, but situations like trade wars obviously are not helping at all, right? And so unfortunately, what comes of that situation is, again, those small family farms are feeling immense pressure economically. A lot of times those farmers are having to get work in town if that's available because they can't support the farming operation anymore. And then there is increased reliance on those government subsidy payments in those trade war times. So the economic issues were already there, and this has definitely increased and intensified the economic stress, which has trickle-down effects in those rural communities when you don't have, strong local families and businesses. You're not going to have rural communities that are vibrant anymore.
Yeah, because in this world, in this country right now, there's this massive divide between the urban setting and the rural setting, and there's part of me that goes, we're in this divide because we don't talk to each other anymore, and I don't know if we ever really did, but we don't identify with each other as much maybe as we did at one point. Do you see a way of bridging that gap to where people in cities can see the problems that folks in rural areas are having to deal with, and vice versa? Do you see that as a possibility?
Absolutely. Work needs to be done there for sure with this rural-urban divide. There has to be an increased understanding from those folks in the city of what goes on in rural communities, what it takes to what rural America even looks like, right, and what it takes to be in those communities. So we're thinking of small businesses and how hard those small business owners have to work every day to make money and stay open, right? Thinking about family farmers that they grow products and food, and those all ultimately end up in cities, right? As consumers are disconnected from the original source, right? So all of those things need to happen. It's the facilitation, the education, and vice versa, right? Rural communities definitely maybe don't appreciate city life because they, are not choosing that for themselves, but there definitely is some increased communication that needs to happen there.
One of the things that I think this pandemic has shown us is how consolidation is harmful. One of the things I know that you guys are working on is trying to work with smaller meat processors and kind of folks who do this kind of processing work to make it more broad based and less dependent on these massive businesses. How do we get back from the point? Because it used to be this way. We used to have regional growers. We used to have regional statewide processors. We used to have this stuff, and it now seems that things have consolidated down to the point to where we're now in an era where there's a handful of these things, and when something breaks down, the whole system shuts down.
Absolutely. And this is an issue that's been ongoing, but is recently blown up since the pandemic hit. So essentially, these small meat processors cannot keep up with the demand. So we have producers that are wanting to sell their livestock to be processed and connect to their consumer, whether they know them and have already sold the product to a consumer in their local community, or if they're using the locker or the processor to connect them. Either way, processors are so backed up, and they are having a hard time, quickly expanding and sort of relieving some of the pressure in the situation. So certain, regulations and certifications, processing has to kind of get more flexible, and there needs to be some state level certifications that can work alongside the federal level, so that quick expansion can happen of the small meat processors, and opening up the opportunity for producers to self-harvest livestock and animals if they so choose.
Don't they already do that? Because I actually know people who you can buy a cow from them, and they will they'll deliver it to you. So I hear this a lot. I hear that we need to deregulate. We need to, or in your words, to be more flexible. And I want to know what does that mean? Because, we hear a lot of the deregulation argument means just, well, we'll throw precaution to the wind. And while people are saying job killing regulations, I'm still concerned about the harm that people get for lack of protections. So, can you give me an
Absolutely.
idea of what kind of regulations and certificates you're looking at?
Absolutely. So essentially, if you are a meat processor, there is high standards for sanitation because you are processing food, correct? So at the federal level right now, you get certified to process meat. And this is just a backlogged system right now. Like I said, especially this year during the pandemic and everyone wanting to get local sources of food. So what can be done specifically? An example of this is something we're working on with the upcoming session in Nebraska is actually having a state level certification program that, again, can work alongside the federal level to, again, keep that sanitation and certification process very, very standardized and very tight so that we're not, I guess I shouldn't have used the word flexible because we definitely want to, stick with the high standards that meat processors are held to, and they do a really good job at this.
Right.
But making sure that the system, so more meat processors can, start business, but then those local meat processors can, increase capacity, making sure that the certification process is flexible enough so that they can, in high demand times, can get certified. So,
yeah, I'm not against the idea of increasing capacity, but the idea of being, to use the word that you regret using, flexible on the sanitation part, I'm a little leery because wouldn't we end up causing a different problem that I don't think any of us really want, especially the processors. So let me ask you, in looking at, this, the nominated Tom Vilsack, I don't know whether he did well the last time around or not. I don't know. I don't really know what his record is. That I'm hoping you'll be able to fill me in a little bit. I'm hoping he does well. I want him to do well. I want our small farmers to be able to thrive because we need them. So do you have some thoughts on how he can help move that along? And do you have specific, requests and ideas?
Yeah, so Governor Tom Vilsack is a unique Democrat in that he is also well-liked and supported by Republicans, mostly because he is what I would consider moderate and does a really good job reaching to both sides of the aisle when he was governor in Iowa, but as his previous appointment as Secretary of Agriculture. So does a really good job understanding both perspectives or, all perspectives, and really understands Iowa agriculture to the point where, we're working with the small family farms and not the large scale corporate farms. So thinking about that small scale, he does a good job connecting to those individuals. But overall, we obviously have priorities that we think are specific issues that he and the administration and obviously the Department of Ag specifically can work on. That being said, things like the Conservation Stewardship Program, which is USDA's leading working lands conservation program, making sure that has strong financial and administrative support is crucial and continues to stay a viable program for those producers wanting to do conservation. Another example, a specific example that we encourage strong support for is to work with rural Americans to incentivize and support implementation of climate smart agriculture and the expansion of renewable energy. So tackling this climate crisis with climate smart agriculture and renewable energy in rural communities is a really important piece of the puzzle here,
right,
and making sure that we incentivize a focus on healthy soil, incorporation of native vegetation on areas of landscape, and making sure programs like the Rural Energy for America program, which is a financial and technical assistance program for rural businesses and farmers who want to do solar panels or wind turbines on their farms and their businesses, making sure those programs are funded,
right,
so that we can increase the clean energy out on the landscape.
No, that's great. We got the talking points. Got the talking points in. That was good. We needed those. What does that mean for Tom Vilsack? How do we get the money to get some of these programs move forward? And do you think he'll do it?
Yeah. So coming up in 3 years is the Farmville. So the 2018 Farmville will expire in 2023. So conversations are already starting and need to be starting with the beginning of this new administration and new Congress. And he definitely needs to be working with those committees in the House and in the Senate to make sure the priorities include those programs I just talked about. But the Farm Bill is how we do all of this, and making sure that we are not only talking with our elected officials, but making sure that their elected officials are actually back in their communities and, talking to their family farmers, talking to the small businesses, talking to all those rural communities to make sure that their voices are heard.
No, it's important. But let me ask you this, because I've had a lot of people say the Farm Bill is basically just welfare for rural America. I don't necessarily believe it. I think we need to have it, but I can see where that's coming from. How would you respond to someone saying that, this is just a lot of pork for the people who make our pork?
Yeah, that's something I've heard as well, and I definitely would say it's incredibly incorrect. All of the programs within Farmville are voluntary programs that our small family farms, mid-sized farms are participating in because they are doing those extra steps. So like I talked about earlier, those conservation programs, that is not a required thing for farmers to do. So, they're growing corn and soybeans, but they're taking the time to implement cover crops. They're taking the time to, drive around grass waterways and buffers so that they are protecting their natural resources and that we are sequestering carbon. So all of those things are extra steps that these farmers are doing, and a Farm Bill is the financial assistance to do those things.
Yeah, I would hope they would do all those things. If they're not going to be the stewards of the land, because it is their, it is their existence. I don't know who else would. Last question I've got for you. You've brought up climate change a couple of times. Do farmers believe climate change is real? I mean, we're still in this world where there are some people who think it's a hoax and it's not a big deal. Do farmers buy it?
I can't speak generally on this topic, but I am enthusiastic about the increased awareness of climate in rural Iowa specifically. I've done a lot of work on the ground over the past 2 years, specifically with family farms, and it is really exciting to see in a room full of farmers, we can talk about climate change and we can talk about these steps that they need to be taking and we need to be taking in rural communities to address climate change.
There you go.
That being said, there's obviously non-believers out there, but we are moving in the absolute right direction.
Terrific. Kayla, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Kayla Bergman, Policy Associate there with the Center for Rural Affairs, CFRA.org, the website. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. That was the day that black farmers formed the Colored Farmers Alliance and Cooperative Union in Houston County, Texas. The Southern Farmers Alliance would not allow black members, so African American farmers decided to form their own organization. They elected 2 black men, J.J. Shuffer as their president and H.S. Spencer as their secretary. A white man, an ex-Confederate soldier, was chosen as the national spokesperson for the group. Organizers moved across the South. They organized around issues including higher crop prices, lower railroad rates, and other policies that would help the sharecroppers and small landowners. In 1890, the organization merged with the rival National Colored Alliance. It grew to a force of 1.2 million farmers. A weekly newspaper, the National Alliance, reported on the activities of the organization. One initiative was to set up exchanges at port cities such as Charleston, Mobile, and New Orleans. These exchanges allowed black farmers to purchase goods at fair prices. They also provided loans for black farmers. The Alliance advocated for black farmers to purchase land, a tough proposition in the sharecropping system of the South. In September of 1891, the Alliance called for a strike of cotton pickers, but the organization did not have the infrastructure to support such a massive effort. The strike never really got off the ground, and in Arkansas, 15 black strikers were killed. The oppressive discrimination that structured Southern agriculture made it exceedingly difficult for black farmers to organize.
Oh, the farmer is the man, the farmer is the man, lives on credit till the fall. With the interest rate so high, it's a wonder he don't die. And the middleman's the one that gets
Like what
it
you hear?
all.
Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Gosh, our trasher-in-chief has really been busy lately, calling Kamala Harris nasty and calling our post offices a joke. But instead of trash talking, shouldn't a president be, running the government? Nah, that bores him. Besides, that's why he packed his cabinet with all those corporate lobbyists who are skilled at trying to rig our government to serve moneyed elites. Now, empowered by Trump, these special interests are our government, literally setting and running America's economic, environmental, health, and other public policies. And what a job they're doing. On us. Check out Andrew Wheeler, head of Trump's EPA. He had been the top lobbyist for a coal mining giant, constantly fighting environmental rules to make this notoriously foul industry clean up its act. Now, the befouler's lobbyist is making the rules, allowing big coal and other fossil fuel giants to pour more toxic contaminants into our air and water. Wheeler wails that his poor multi-billion-dollar former clients must be freed from burdensome requirements to limit the damage they do to the health of America's people and our planet. Burdensome? His latest edict frees oil and gas corporations from having to fix methane leaks in their wells, pipelines, etc. Fixing leaks is burdensome? Hello, if you had a gas leak at your house, would you not want to burden the company to come fix it? Not only is methane a potent greenhouse gas causing climate change, but Wheeler's don't worry about it favor to his industry buddies comes just as scientists have discovered that methane leaks are 2 to 3 times worse than his EPA has been reporting. This means the industry is driving us toward a climate crisis faster than anyone realized. This is Jim Hightower saying, talk about nasty. The Trumpeteers have turned government totally bass-ackwards, protecting polluters instead of people.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, nothing coming out of Mitch McConnell until he gets his immunity shield, which, I just find wholly unacceptable. What's the point in getting a couple of bucks in your pocket if you're only going to end up going to work, getting sick, and potentially dying? This is just rude. It's ridiculous, but it is what we've come to expect. And the longer it takes for us to get a survival bill, the longer it takes to get those survival checks out to help families make it to the next month, to stay in their homes, to not be foreclosed on or evicted, to keep food on the table, and keep people, staying away from each other and doing the right thing so we can tap down this virus, the much worse it's going to be down the road, which is why we need sane, rational leadership. We need people who actually, care. Let's start there. Here to share some thoughts on where we are and where our economy could end up, I've asked our good friend Pedro DaCosta to come talk with us. Pedro is a senior reporter at Market News. He's also a columnist for Forbes and Market Watch. Pedro, thanks for taking time for us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Rick.
So I'm looking at this and I keep thinking that at some point, and I guess it just shows how naive I can be sometimes, that at some point the Republicans are going to go, no, we really do need to help people. Our constituents are really hurting. We really need to pass something. I keep waiting for that, and, it just keeps not coming.
One of the fascinating things for me to watch as someone who covers the Federal Reserve for a living is all these Republican appointees. In fact, most of the Fed now are actually Trump appointees because he got to appoint a bunch of them, a bunch of governors. Republicans begging Republicans in Congress for stimulus. In other words, the Fed is going to Congress. Jay Powell, who's himself a Republican, going to Congress and telling Congress that basically the economy is going to falter if they don't do something, and actually kind of showing his hand a little bit, because the Fed doesn't like to say it doesn't have any more tools, but it's kind of saying that it really monetary policy is not going to help us here. So
now this is one of those moments, and it's just interesting you bring up the Fed. It's one of these moments where the Fed's been bailing us out for way too long. It was the only thing we could get done during the Obama years, because again, back to Mitch McConnell and these hostage situations that continually popped up during the Obama years. And I fully expect if they don't get the seats in Georgia, we're going to continue to see again through the Biden years.
That's kind of the expectation, is that we may not get any kind of stimulus even under a Biden administration because of obstruction from a GOP-controlled Senate. So that's becoming actually a macroeconomic fear that's permeating Wall Street itself, that if you don't get a fiscal stimulus, the economy could actually face a double dip, and that growth might actually become negative in the first quarter. We're already seeing signs that because of this, I don't know if you call it a second or third wave, I don't know what we're in, but because of this horror show of COVID that we have out there, the employment numbers are already deteriorating. Never mind, the death count, which is just horrific and we've become numb to. But the economy is deteriorating. So the whole rationale for the whole reopening rationale, which is kind of misguided anyway, because what guides the economic behavior really is the public health outlook rather than the shutdown orders. But that's where we're at. We have a deteriorating economy and no support from the place where it's most needed.
And look, there's nothing coming out of the White House right now. They're doing their temper tantrum tour. Of course, today getting thrown out of the Supreme Court. I hope at some point they wake up and go, no, we need to actually do something. But I just don't see it. I just don't see McConnell and the Republicans stepping forward. Now, is there hope? I don't know. I look at Josh Hawley, who came out today and said he wants to move a piece of legislation to give every individual making under $75,000 a year a $1,200 check, like they did before. And even he pointed out, we all voted for it. It's not controversial. Well, let's do this to get through this period so we can get to the other side of this virus and then do the work of cleaning up the mess. But you can't clean up the mess until we get through this moment.
And there are several elements to it. There's stimulus checks that are potentially one element. The expiring unemployment benefits are another huge element. 13 million people, I think the day after Christmas, they fall off the rolls. So you have, even though jobless claims are still rising, they're becoming increasingly less representative of the picture because many people are no longer eligible, and we're also, and so, and then there's the state and local issue. The state and local budgets are being strained by COVID, obviously, and so without some help, we're going to face additional layoffs and already have. So there's all these pending issues that without them being addressed, 2021 could be a rough year for us.
No, it's absolutely going to be a rough year. I know where I'm at here in Pennsylvania. They're already talking about, the tax receipts are way down. Education spending is probably going to get slashed and burned. Health and Human Services spending slashed and burned if nothing comes from the federal government. And the nightmare scenario you laid out, if the Democrats don't pick up those seats in Georgia or Republicans find a soul, there will be not another stimulus / survival bill to help us get through those ugly times. And it will be ugly, dark, and painful.
Absolutely. And one of the kind of sad and dangerous things about this particular downturn / I wouldn't call it a recovery, but whatever the immediate bounce back is that it's been so grotesquely unequal. We've talked a lot about inequality on this show before, but this pandemic recession is so unequal in so many ways that I know you've talked about here that disparate impact, it raises the specter that the problem is so concentrated at the bottom that the political motivation for there to be something broad to be done kind of becomes less. And that's dangerous and scary because those are the really vulnerable people who need help the most.
No, absolutely. I mean, and to highlight that, there are a number of organizations that have pointed out that from the beginning of the pandemic until now, our billionaire classes enriched themselves to the tune of another $1 trillion. All the while, the frontline heroes and essential workers are still working for minimum wage at $7.25. But we can't afford to raise the minimum wage because, well, I don't know.
That's right. There's that issue, and there's the issue of just job losses. Period. Right. Forget wage increases. We're facing a job market where just millions have just lost their livelihoods. Let's not forget the small businesses that are shutting down that are a tragedy for the business owner themselves, but also for the people that work for them. And so the whole concept of a recovery that allows some people to almost feel like nothing's happening. I mean, sometimes if you read enough Wall Street notes, you would think like, wow, this recovery is just booming and there's nothing wrong with it. You hear a lot about there's nothing wrong with the underlying economy. If we just get over the pandemic, everything will go back to normal. And it's kind of like, you don't just go back from 7% unemployment to quote unquote normal. And as we talked about on the show before, we weren't even at normal, even with 4% or 3.5% unemployment, because there was a ton of people suffering then. So,
well, I mean, the other side of this is
compounded since.
Right. The other side of this, though, is we're not at 6.7% unemployment. We're somewhere still around 15% because they've thrown so many people out of being counted because there's nothing out there and they've stopped looking. So it's not that we only have so many, 6.7% unemployed. We got more than double that. It's just that there's nothing out there for them.
That's right. I think some of the estimates are closer to 10, 11%. It's definitely in the double digits of the realistic unemployment rate, of the baseline unemployment rate. And then you're getting things like you have high double-digit unemployment for younger workers, high double-digit unemployment for lower income workers. Like when you're actually able to break down that data by income, race, and age, the picture gets even more dire.
So what is it going to take? Does it take the Hoovervilles again? I mean, are we going back to that the day after Christmas when potentially we could see people evicted from their homes and foreclosed on, and in the months to come as the heat gets turned off and all of the safety net programs end up starving away? Is that what it's going to take? Coxey's army again to come marching across the country to D.C. What do you think it'll take?
I really don't know. That's a forecast that I dare not make because I honestly, I would have thought that a pandemic would have been sufficient incentive for government action to be kind of depoliticized. But in fact, it was the opposite. The very wearing of masks became the center of politics. And it's so strange when you look at other countries where there is more social cohesion and where that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
There was actually a story the other day about countries where there's semi going back to normal. It's just bizarre to see people going to shows and going to restaurants without concern because they took care of business.
They did the right thing. No, you're right. But, here's the thing that gets me. And I was just reading a report the other day from the Washington Post that people being arrested for stealing food, that percentage is going skyrocketing through the roof because, as you pointed out, the jobs aren't there. People are struggling. I'm very
proud to say that article was actually written by my wife, and it was a really, really incredible piece of reporting, as you mentioned. And it talked about like people who were, who were kind of stealing for the first time and just stealing food for their children and kind of not really feeling guilty about it because they needed to eat and willingly admitting, right, that they were stealing food because that's kind of the state of despair.
And I would expect you to. Look, if your kids are hungry and you've got nothing else, and I've said this before, the one thing I wanted to make sure that when we had kids that never happened, that I would have to look into my children's eyes and know that they were hungry. You wouldn't know it by looking at me now, but when I was a kid, the cupboards were empty. And we were in that situation where, my mother didn't have resources to be able to put anything in the refrigerator at times. And no child in the richest country of the world should ever go through that. So you know what? I'm okay if someone goes and steals something from a supermarket to feed their kids. I don't think they should have to. I think we should be able to make sure that there are things in place that can help them. But I'll tell you, I'm not going to throw them in jail. I'm not going to punish them. I'm going to try and figure out how to help them so they don't have to.
It's hard to feel anything but compassion for a parent who's in that situation. It's kind of like a warfare situation. So, definitely.
But good on your wife for the reporting. It was a great article.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Reminds me of a quote from one of my favorite rappers, Benny the Butcher from Buffalo, who grew up in similarly disadvantaged situations. And he says, put a mask on my face if my rent due, and, point well taken. You know what I mean? If push comes to shove and you have to feed your family.
No, absolutely. So let me ask you this, because we're seeing this, the two Americas really playing. Seems like 100 years ago. There are some who are doing okay through this. They're surviving. And in fact, a lot of people are actually thriving in this environment. But there are so many who aren't. And we're creating that massive gulf between the haves and the have-nots. And at some point, this unity, this breaks, and we become like almost a third world country in certain respects for certain people. You coming from Brazil, you kind of grew up in this kind of environment, didn't you?
I did. Well, and I've been feeling like we've been, I've called it the underdeveloping of America. I've had that feeling for quite a while, right? I moved here in the late 80s, early 90s, and there's a sense of institutional devolution. Not that it's a linear, progress, and that America was ever this great ideal to that somehow deteriorated. I'm not trying to aspire to the past, but there's been a sort of institutional deterioration that reminded me of an emerging market environment. Not just growing up in Brazil, but early in my reporting career, just covering emerging economies generally, a kind of societal dysfunction, institutional decay, lack of faith in basic institutions, lack of faith in the truth. So all these things that are, more common in poorer, more volatile countries are now more common, more commonplace here. And so it does have that eerie feeling.
Now, I'm not just picking on your home country of Brazil. Other countries similarly that have the kind of inequality that we're looking at and potentially heading towards if people don't get these survival checks and we don't have a government that's going to partner with people to save them from the hard down that my Senator Pat Toomey wished for during the last financial collapse.
I mean, the reaction to the pandemic itself is kind of symbolic of, there's a third worldiness about our reaction to the pandemic, right? How chaotic it was, how disorganized the response was, how state by state. And so I think that the pandemic revealed a lot about which countries kind of had it together and which didn't. And we clearly, by our death count and by our infection count and by our lack of agreement on basic science, we clearly don't.
That last one is the part that gets me. The fact that, we keep telling ourselves, oh, we're the best educated people in the world. And yet you look out in the street and you go, I must have missed that.
Yeah, I always wonder if there's ever going to be somebody that can win the presidency in the United States just saying, there's such a kind of strong kind of jingoistic nationalism in this country. I wonder if somebody could ever run for the presidency and just saying, yeah, we're a great country. We might not be number one. We're top 10. I wonder if you always have to say like greatest country on earth. Like, does that have to be the thing? Like, is it always like go back to like a sports analogy? I find that very funny because in Brazil, we didn't have that feeling. Like you grow up in a country that kind of isn't number one in economic terms or in military terms. I guess you have more humility about your place in the world, right? You just kind of, you joke about it. And I think with that humility comes a certain ability to make improvements as well. So,
well, I would like to have us have a little bit of humility. I still like to be the idea that we're somewhere, the chest thumping seems nice, but it would be great if we did
top
it for
10 isn't bad. There's a lot of countries out there.
Yeah, I would like to do it for the right reasons. I would like to make sure that we don't have a quarter of our children going to bed hungry at night. I would like to make sure that we don't have the kind of homelessness problem that we have for veterans. I would like to have those problems addressed. Those would be great things that we could be number one at.
That's a great point. It's number one at what, right? Is it the size of your GDP, or is it like infant mortality? Is it like healthcare outcomes? And I think that's you hit a really important point. We gotta find the right metrics to be number one in, and then we can be proud of it.
That's right. I like to be number one, but just the right things. But Pedro, I appreciate the time. I hope folks will check out your work. You do fabulous stuff over there at Market News. We'll get links out on how folks can check it out. But I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Pedro DaCosta. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day streetcar workers in Kansas City walked off the job. It was the third strike since August 1917. Workers had previously struck for union recognition and joined the city general strike that spring. By summer, the city was so desperate for wartime labor, the transit company began hiring women. Though women faced initial opposition, by fall, the union demanded they receive equal pay for equal work. The company had been paying them $15 less a month than their male co-workers. The Amalgamated filed charges with the National War Labor Board, demanding a general wage increase and equal wages for women. The board quickly ruled in the union's favor, but Kansas City Railway refused to abide by the decision. And on this day, 2,675 men and 127 women walked off the job, demanding the company honor the board's ruling. Instead, the company hired scabs. In the rush to restore service, the company failed to properly train the scab drivers, and a number of streetcar crashes reduced the transit company's fleet by more than 300 cars. According to Maureen Weiner Greenwald, author of Women, War, and Work, the company alleged in the press that the strike was an attack against the entire community. On the Missouri side, state militia guarded the strikebreakers, while U.S. Marshals guarded rail tracks on the Kansas side. By April 1919, a federal grand jury indicted union leaders for obstructing a vital industry during wartime, even though the war had been over for 6 months. By May, the strike was lost, and the union busted. It would take another 20 years before Kansas City Transit would finally be organized. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, I look at this failure by Mitch McConnell and the Republicans to get something into the hands of Americans to help them through this. And I think Pedro's right. Look, they're playing the game that it's going to be the others. It's going to be the people who are already struggling who are going to feel the brunt of this. And it's true. They're saying that potentially this could set women back, 20 years. The wage cuts and the problems that are going to come could harm women in the workplace and set them back 20 years. And minorities, forget it. They were already struggling, and it's going to make it even worse there. And the fact that, just even bringing up the fact of a minimum wage increase during a pandemic, you could shout it down. But if now is not the time to be going, look, we need to get more money into people's hands to help them survive, I don't know when is. And you go, well, they're going to lose jobs. These places are still, some of them are still doing okay. Thank you very much. And also, if we had a government that partnered with them, as I've been saying for the longest time, we could have, over the summer, with a functional government, we could have done all of the things that needed to get us through this. We could have had vision. We could have had foresight. We could have had statesmen step forward and lead. And what we had was a bunch of little whiny snots who only cared about themselves. We had a bunch of corporate-controlled puppets who only cared what campaign cash they could stuff into their pockets, and they could give a tinker's damn about their neighbors because they aren't their neighbors. They're somebody else's neighbors. Because I'll bet you there's nobody in our Congress who's missed a meal. I'll bet you there's nobody in that Congress who's gone to the cupboards and gone, oh, there's nothing there. And had to look in their children's eyes and know that child's hungry. I don't ever want to imagine that feeling, and nobody in the wealthiest country in the history of civilization at its wealthiest point should ever have to. Ever. And as I said, look, if I'm on the jury and someone got caught stealing food because they're going to try and feed their kids, there's no way I convict that person. I convict the system for putting them on trial for not trying to help them. Because that's what we should be doing. And you look at some of these food lines. The one from Dallas just blew my mind. Miles long. Hours long. People just trying to get something to put on their tables. And you know that, looking at the cars that were in that line, these are not people who are used to asking for help. So we're heading into the ugliest part of this. And this shouldn't be a surprise, shouldn't be a shock. We shouldn't go, oh, I didn't know, because we did. We knew, 8 months ago that this was going to be the ugliest part of this. I've been saying on this show for months, and as I've told you, I've got a listener who, this is what he does for a living. He's a smart guy. He modeled this out and said, 4,000 people a day. Originally it was 3,000, and then he adjusted his variables because who could have really imagined that Donald Trump and the Republican Party would be as idiotic, as ridiculous, as stupid, as complicit. I mean, as hateful to hold these massive super spreader events all around the country. And then to encourage people to do dumb things. Yeah, there's a war on Thanksgiving. And we find out, oh yeah, you went to Thanksgiving and the whole family now has it. Well, most of you'll survive. Yeah, that's the right thinking. And here we are, close to 300,000 dead, and each and every day for the next, who knows, 3 months, 2 months? We're going to have 3,000 to 4,000 people each and every day dying. We've already passed the number of dead during World War II. All because of failed leadership. Over the summer, they could have done something. And this is what gets me. This is what angers me. This is what keeps me so frustrated. They could have put systems in place to say, you know what? During these rough months, if you're not one of the quote-unquote essential workers, stay the hell home. We're going to pay you 90% of your salary. Stay home. We're going to pay it through your employer, and we're going to make sure that you stay on the rolls. They stay in business. You are able to support your family and still stay safe. We should have been doing this all along. And you know what we haven't done? We haven't built that mechanism for the next time or the next time. We're leaving ourselves vulnerable because we have failed leadership. Failed leadership from people who tell us that they don't believe in government. Failed leadership from people who say government can't do anything. And then they set out to make sure that their predictions are right. Then they set out to show us that Republican governance doesn't work. That when Republicans are in charge, government does not work. A government of, for, and by we the people doesn't exist. And if they don't get their way, they throw temper tantrums and they hold their breath and they kick and they scream and they hold the rest of us hostage, like they're doing right now. And get ready for it. They're going to continue to do it into the next year and through the Biden term. There's no question about that, which is why Georgia, if you are listening, deliver us from this evil. It's that simple. It's angering, it's frustrating. But I'm hoping as Scott Dworkin said earlier, I'm hoping there's a light bulb that goes on in some of these folks' heads. And they realize the damage that this president has done. And more than just Donald Trump, the damage that the Republican Party has done to this country. These are not patriots. These are not statesmen. These are cowards who have followed Donald Trump to the end. And the hope is come next election time, you remember that. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The Arctic really has achieved a new normal.
Scientists warn of Arctic's dramatic transformation. Trump EPA makes it even harder to enact new pollution rules. Plus, bad news for big oil. New York State's giant pension fund is divesting from fossil fuels.
All of that good, bad news and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
People talk about like the Green New Deal, like AOC is going to personally come in your house and steal your Christmas presents and then replace it with a lump of coal and then come back and replace the lump of coal with a solar panel.
Oh, like she's not. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it's been a while, actually, happily, since we've had exploding plants, but we got one again now?
Yes, unfortunately, we do have another chemical plant explosion, this time in Bell, West Virginia. The explosion on Tuesday night at a DuPont Chemours chlorine plant killed one worker and injured two others. Residents within a 2-mile radius of the plant were ordered to shelter in place from the toxic fumes until the fire was out. The cause is still under investigation. Meanwhile, the Trump Environmental Protection Agency this week finalized a sweeping new rule that undermines the ability of future administrations to issue new curbs on pollution of any kind. The new rule restricts the EPA to only considering costs to industry from a new rule and prohibits the agency from including public health co-benefits and cost savings gained from reducing toxic pollution, effectively removing the benefit part from its cost-benefit analysis. It makes it difficult to justify any new regulation if you don't count the costs in American lives and health.
And is this going to be one of those rules that they have made it difficult for Joe Biden to turn around when he comes in?
Well, the incoming Biden administration can reverse the rule once in office, but that process could take years. It's one of many Trump administration rule changes that are intended to handcuff future EPAs from protecting public health.
And another one of those rules that if the Democrats can take the Senate, they'd be able to turn around with majorities in both the House and the Senate.
Right. If Democrats control both houses, they would be able to invoke the Congressional Review Act, which allows Congress to strike down such last-minute regulations.
Hey, you folks in Georgia paying attention? Don't answer that. I suspect you are. You probably can't avoid it at this point.
Another disastrous year for the Arctic. NOAA released its annual Arctic report card this week, warning that persistent and accelerating warming in the region is affecting Arctic ecosystems and the entire global climate system. The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. This year, it saw temperatures spiking to 100 degrees Fahrenheit north of the Arctic Circle.
Wow.
Sea ice extent was the second lowest ever observed in the satellite era. Plus, dangerously low snow cover led to record severe wildfires and accelerated thawing of permafrost. Both, in turn, released even more climate-warming greenhouse gases in a self-reinforcing feedback loop that scientists predicted decades ago.
That scientists warned about decades ago.
Arctic scientist Rick Toman, in a virtual press conference, warned that the region is rapidly shifting.
The 2020 report card describes an Arctic region that continues along a path that is warmer, less frozen, and biologically changed in ways that were scarcely imaginable even a generation ago. Nearly everything in the Arctic, from ice and snow to human activity, is changing so quickly that there's really no reason to think that in 30 years, much of anything will be as it is today.
And they warn that has global consequences. Arctic warming has cascading effects around the planet, raising sea levels, changing ocean circulation, and new research suggests playing a role in altering global weather patterns and intensifying extreme weather events. Finally, there is some good news. New York State's pension fund, one of the world's largest investment funds, this week committed to divesting from fossil fuels. The state controller announced the fund will ditch most of its fossil fuel investments within 5 years, and by 2040 will divest from companies that haven't eliminated their greenhouse gas emissions, calling them a risk to the fund's long-term value. The fund will use its investment clout to pressure companies to align their operations with climate action. Energy analysts say the move could accelerate a broader shift in global markets away from oil and gas companies.
This is big news. I know it's very good news for a lot of environmental groups who have been pushing for this for years. This is one of the largest, if not the largest, such pension funds in the world to take this action, as I understand.
Yep, and it frees up billions of dollars for investment in renewable energy and innovative carbon-neutral industries.
Now, there's an idea. For much more on that story, all of the stories, and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it was reported today that White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, hinted, they used the quoted word hinted, in a phone call to FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn that his job security might be in jeopardy if there wasn't a vaccine approved, an emergency vaccine approved today. I believe the Pfizer emergency vaccine. And lo and behold, it's been approved. So you have the FDA authorizing Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine for emergency use, which means that now you can go forward and get Granny vaccinated, get our frontline heroes vaccinated who work in the hospitals and first responders. I think this is a good thing. Let's hope it's rolled out well. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on where we are, the big news of the day from the Supreme Court, and all else in the world of Washington, our good friend, former Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, if you're the FDA chief, he's going to lose his job in a couple of days anyway, isn't he?
Well, yeah, I think his term expires. I think that's around the corner.
Yeah, because I was going, you've got Meadows evidently reportedly threatening him now. Stephen Hahn has said that that's not how the phone call went, but I'm going, you're going to be out of office. You're going to be out anyway. So I don't know that that's really a threat.
Well, I mean, they could say it is, or a push, but it wouldn't be the first time that the FDA has been pushed or, quote, semi-threatened or near-threatened,
right?
On this issue. So it's been out there before.
So the big news of the day, they cracked the Zodiac Killer's code.
Really?
Evidently, that was one of the I just threw that out there. Evidently, on the day that Ted Cruz didn't get to argue at the Supreme Court, they did crack the Cipher 420, I think it was called. that basically just said, "I'm enjoying you not catching me."
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I guess this, the Zodiac killer killed 5 people between 68 and 69, and there were all these coded messages that we have now finally cracked the one that has had us stumped for so long.
Well, I bet a computer did it, but that's okay. A human's taking credit.
Yeah.
Probably a computer did it.
Oh, there you go. But I had to get. Everyone was expecting Ted Cruz and SCOTUS. Had to throw Zodiac in there.
I thought you were going to mention Ted Cruz and his father in the Kennedy assassination. I didn't know where you were going. So.
Zodiac.
Remember that?
Okay. Oh yeah, who could forget that?
Right.
Were you surprised by today's Supreme Court ruling?
No, I was not. I had sent this to a radio personality, or I had sent a statement to him actually yesterday, and I said, it's done. And then he said, no, you just wait. It's coming. Believe me, you'll see.
No.
So when my phone beeped and I saw the Supreme Court ruling, I sent it to him and I said, this is what I told you yesterday. I wasn't surprised. I thought it would turn out that way. I really did.
Yeah, we had the attorney general from Nevada on yesterday, and he, I said, look, I'm not a lawyer, but it doesn't seem to me like they've got standing. And this is exactly what the Supreme Court said. You don't have standing, and you've got someone like Alan West, who I thought was from Florida, former congressman from Florida. I guess they threw him out. He is now the chairman of the Texas GOP. He's now calling for secession because, if we can't interfere in other states' elections, well, I don't want to be part of this.
Well, now the other thing, too, and I had said that I thought it would just be dismissed based on no standing, but also the justices, 2 of the justices, including Clarence Thomas and Alito, that's 2 of the court's conservatives, also said they would have allowed Texas to sue, but they wouldn't have blocked the states from finalizing the election results. So 2 of them said, well, we would have given standing to Texas, but made it known that they would have still not agreed with Texas, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, because they are the 2, in my view, the 2 craziest of the conservative justices, and to have them decide that they had to put their name on that, interesting to me.
Right, and then they said they would have allowed it again to be entered into the court, which is not even what happened, but they would have still not blocked the election results. So I thought that was quite interesting.
Now, 126 Republican legislators have signed on to do what? Walk me through what it is that they think that they're going to be able to do.
Well, they signed on to give, I guess, what you'd say a push or, to the case. They had signed on to that. Now that has finished, then some people are saying, well, since they signed on to that case, they may then protest the actual Electoral College decision, not this Monday. That'll be made on the floor of the House by accepting the electors, but in January when the Congress ratifies the process that will occur Monday. I don't know that they'll do that. Some may vote against it. I highly doubt McCarthy included would try to vote out the electoral process in January. McCarthy, of course, is the minority leader of the Republicans in the House.
Right, but he signed on.
They signed on to the suit.
Right.
I don't anticipate all of them would actually cast a floor vote.
Because, I'm looking at this and I'm going, at what point do you realize you've lost? I mean, Trump has lost. I forget who was 0. Was it the Tampa Bay Buccaneers who were 0-16 the one year? I mean, he's losing almost as bad as they did.
Right. And if they didn't have the guts to, just say, look, this is done, and they signed on and they say, we gave him his day in court. Okay, they could do this technically. We gave him his day in court. We got behind giving him his day in court. Now we're done. Then they've got some technical wiggle room, I guess you could say. But if they try to actually vote down the electoral process and don't recognize it in January, they're going to be voting or trying to vote down the process that's going to occur on the 14th with the Vice President of the United States in the dais on the floor of the House when they accept the electors' results. So it's done.
It's done.
And again, if they try then to undo those results, then they for sure have obviously not accepted it.
Is there any punishment for this kind of stuff? I mean, at some point, is there any censure or anything?
No, somebody had raised the issue. Congressman Bill Pascrell Jr. had raised the issue about the 14th Amendment and sort of like a sedition issue, but that would have about as much ability to be imposed on them as what we call the Logan Amendment, which, technically members of Congress go over and talk to a delegation in some country. They could be, charged with sort of like a treason of sort. You always hear Logan mentioned against Republicans and Democrats when they've done something internationally. So that would have about the same push as the 14th Amendment. So there's nothing that could be.
So it's over. It's done.
To them. But it's done. It's not going to look good, obviously, for them if they do this, trying to overturn on the floor of the House something certified, which involved the Vice President of the United States himself.
Yeah, and numerous court cases in states all across the country, and a couple of Supreme Court cases. It's over.
Correct.
It's done.
Done.
Trump lost. Let's move on. So let's move on to figuring out how to save the country from the next depression and millions of people losing their homes and their jobs and their savings and going hungry for the next couple of months. And I just don't see Mitch McConnell moving anything that's going to be helpful, even though there are some, it looks like a couple of Republicans breaking ranks a little bit. So I guess my question is a couple-fold. One, do you think we're going to get anything done? But two, and more importantly, when, let's say the Democrats don't take both seats in Georgia, is there a way for the Republicans to work with the Democrats to not allow McConnell to be majority leader? How does that process work?
Well, I mean, it would depend on, on the will of the Republicans at the time, depending on Georgia, what happens there. Now, you never know. If the Democratic side were to win, the two seats, then it's very possible that due to that loss, that McConnell would be blamed and then would become not the minority leader. But you never know on that outcome. It's pretty hard to undo a sitting leader of either party because they raised the money, they're there, they've got the power. People are afraid to do it, but a lot of heat would come to bear, I think, on McConnell. And if there was a bipartisan effort, it wouldn't take too many people to just say you're done. It really wouldn't.
No,
just a couple.
No, this is where I'm at. I'm going, okay, let's say you get one, they split them. They get one of the seats and you get a 51-49. And you get someone like, you get Murkowski, Collins, and Romney, since their names keep getting thrown up, to say, you know what, we want somebody else. Could even be Romney for all I care. And get all the Democrats to get behind that. Is that possible?
It could, sure. I mean, that could happen. You never know. When it's that close, and with the feelings that are out, today, with the pressure from the public, if there is no piece of legislation, I thought at one point in time that, like everybody, this would be coming together, but it simply looks farther apart. And you do have some bipartisan effort in the Senate to do something. Bernie Sanders had thrown out the stimulus, and actually ended up, successfully with another Republican in the Senate to get the White House to say yes to that. But it just doesn't look good right now that they're going to get some type of deal. And of course, people have no income; they're going to face eviction. Not going to be able to take care of their families. I mean, it's going to be a bleak situation. And as we know, daily this virus is on the rise. And yes, sure, there's a vaccine, but that's not going to be for a while.
It's not going to get out to the masses anyway very quickly. And someone had brought up to me today that why aren't we testing people who may have already, they've already got it, they may have been already exposed to it, and may have the antibodies or the antigens or whatever that you need to have to be immune to it. And so we don't have to vaccinate those people. Is there a way? And, there's some people who are saying, yeah, there's a way to develop a test. We haven't done that. And I haven't heard anybody talk about that outside of a handful of people that I interact with to lower the number of doses of the vaccine that we need right away.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, there is a test to see, because I actually tried to get it a while back in Dayton, Ohio, and then they changed the rule on it, and then they changed the price on it, and went up to, I don't know, $250 or something. And it was to try to test and see if you did have the antibodies. But I never heard anything more about it. So, I don't know that they could. I think it's a great idea. I just don't think they can roll it. I don't think they can roll it out fast enough and do it fast enough.
Yeah, I mean, $250. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is the scary part of this, that you're going to have people who aren't going to be able to get it because they can't afford it, or they're going to go, well, I'll risk it because I don't have the money for it. It's insane to me.
Right, and with me, I mean, I was going to do it anyway, but then they changed it and they upped the price, and I thought, okay, is this really legitimate? That's what went through my mind too.
Yeah,
this wasn't some government okayed deal. It was, set up running in Dayton, Ohio, and I didn't see stamped by the Fed government on it, so I just finally said, okay, I'm not sure about this. So I don't think they could roll anything out, in time. I mean, it's a great idea because I have heard, and who knows how accurate, but if you did have it, the antibodies, in some cases, could only last 4 months, supposedly. So, nobody ever knew. Yeah, nobody ever took that step, that forward thinking, of what you just said, which is a great idea, actually.
It's just one of those things where, and again, this comes with failed leadership. I mean, we should be working in every direction. And I know Trump wants to take credit for the vaccine and all that. And if you have to, give him if you have to. I give credit to the scientists, the people who delivered it. And we could have done it much quicker, I think, had he not denied it for so long and the nonsense that came around with that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, the whole deal could have went down quicker. Response could have been quicker. Because if you look at Taiwan's the best example, Rick. I don't know if you followed Taiwan at all. They have had 0 cases. Think about that. 0.
Wow.
They acted early. They acted efficiently. People coming into the country, they took the painstaking time, if they allowed them in, to have this quarantine and to actually help them with it and put them in a place. I mean, they did everything, and that's why they're at 0 cases. But we're way past that, obviously.
Yeah, there's no going back. Someone would say, well, we need to shut down and do all this stuff. I'm going, it's almost too late.
Right.
To do that simple step of staying away from each other. It's now we're going to have to suffer through it.
Well, there's that, and plus in Ohio, our governor, who, by the way, I think Mike DeWine, he's Republican, had done a pretty good job of trying to really push the whole issue in the mask, etc. We have a curfew from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. and I think it was this morning. He exempted, football games, and in Cincinnati and Cleveland, et cetera, after 10 o'clock, people in stadiums. So you're looking going, okay, curfew for everybody else, except, if you're one of the 1,500 in the stands, it's okay. You can use the restrooms. It's okay.
That's crazy.
But if you're 2 or 3 people after 10, it's not. So, then you have those inconsistencies, which are a shame. So, yeah, we're way past everything. You're right.
No, I mean, and that's the scary thing. And we don't even know how long this vaccine is going to work. We don't have any answer to those questions. This was rushed through. I'm hoping that all of the scientists and the smart people who did this.
Right.
That's who I have faith in. I don't have faith in Donald Trump. I have faith in the people who this is what they do. This is their this is what they've spent their life doing.
Right.
Finally, I wanted to get your thoughts on the today the Senate passed the stopgap measure to a whole week. We've funded the government for another whole week. Is this something we should expect if the Democrats don't get both seats in Georgia for the next at least 2 years?
You mean on the stopgap measure?
Yep. We're going to pass appropriate bills every couple of weeks, and kind of a reboot of what 2010 was, 2011.
I mean, we don't pass budgets anyway. We always pass, a continuing. The United States passes a continuing resolution. I love when they call it a budget. It's not a budget. They used to do budgets, and these are just temporary. Punt them down the field. And there's a lot of drama involved with these. Oh, we're to the edge. I mean, the media does it. It's a cliffhanger. We're to the edge. What are we going to do? And then it's extended for 7 days, and then there becomes a profile in courage where it gets extended for 5 or 6 months. And that's what they've done over and over and over. In fact, if my memory serves me right, there hasn't been an actual budget process done thoroughly for 14 to 15 some years.
Wow. Crazy times.
And that's a problem, Rick, because a budget process, whether you're conservative, you're liberal, whatever you are, a budget process allows everything to be aired out.
Yep.
This is where you add a little bit to domestic spending and you add a little bit to defense, and then you throw it out there. And that's what they've been doing.
And that certainty that the Republicans used to talk about an awful lot, that we have this plan in place and we've figured out how to pay for it and we're going to pay for it. All of that, you're right. It's gone.
Been gone,
and probably never coming back.
Not now. I doubt it.
Crazy. Bob, I appreciate the time. Hope you have a great weekend, my friend.
You too. Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2012. That was the day that Michigan Governor Rick Snyder signed right-to-work legislation into law. The birthplace of the United Auto Workers Union had just become the 24th state to pass legislation that guaranteed the open shop and the prohibition of mandatory dues collection. More than 10,000 trade unionists gathered in Lansing that day to express their outrage. The only source of income that unions have is their dues base. Without it, unions can't adequately represent their members. Work of unions isn't just about effectively negotiating a contract. It also includes fighting contract violations, excessive discipline and wrongful discharges, and enforcing safety and good working conditions on the job. All of this suffers under right to work. But this is nothing new. Right to work laws have their roots in fighting the Wagner Act and the CIO organizing drives throughout the South in the 1940s. The Texas billionaire and lobbyist Vance Muse fought hard against child labor laws, the 8-hour day, and even the right for striking workers to picket. Pro-segregationist Democrats, cotton brokers, Fred Koch, the DuPont brothers, Gerald Sloan of General Motors, and others supported him in his efforts. His organization, the Christian American Association, was closely aligned with the Ku Klux Klan. Muse argued that segregation could only be maintained by enforcing the open shop. Otherwise, whites would be forced to interact with blacks. He said, quote, "From now on, white women and white men will be forced into organizations with black African apes whom they will have to call brothers or lose their jobs. The wealth class has spent millions of dollars over 60 years to defeat working people and reverse hard-fought gains." Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Evidently, Devin Nunes, and let's finish off on this. Evidently, Devin Nunes, the Kremlin gremlin, as one person reminds me, the Republican from California, he has tested positive for COVID-19. He is now one of more than 40 members of Congress that have tested positive, 11 senators, 34 House members. This is one of those guys who all along was saying, stop watching the death counter. We need to keep as many people employed as possible. Basically, not a big deal. So he's got it. To be honest, he'll probably be fine because, well, he's going to get the best treatment possible. This is my problem with Rudy Giuliani. This was my problem with Chris Christie. There were people who say, well, if Chris Christie, dies because he's got all these comorbidities, he could go. I'm going, he's not going anywhere because he's going to get the best treatment that money can buy, the kind of treatment that the rest of us don't get. And while there are these treatments out there, they're scarce. And sorry, if you're not on that list, you ain't getting it. If you're not Rudy Giuliani or Donald Trump, better luck next time. And this is the problem that I have getting through these next couple of months. I keep telling the kids we'll be okay come spring, late spring. I think late spring, early summer, we'll get through this. Life will start to move back to some bit of normalcy. Once we get the vaccine, I gotta believe that because it gives us some hope. It gives us something to look forward to because this is going to be a rough couple of months. Depression's going to go up. All of the negative stuff is going to happen. We just have to prepare for it. And it'd be great if we had a survival bill come out of the Senate. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show.